people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fucking fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Michaela Mayer versus Alicia Baumgartner. Let's talk about the fight. A tense battle of highly skilled
Quality operators, the both of them, but Alicia was just better.
sharper and faster. At the start of this thing, I had Alicia Baumgartner sweeping the first 3 rounds, winning the battle of the jabs in the first round. We saw Michaela Mayer attempt to pick up the tempo,
She tried to pick up the pace in the second round.
attempting to jab her way in order to close the gap on Alicia Baumgartner, but Alicia's speed.
Alicia Baumgartner, who was moving lateral, creating space, and looking to counter Michaela's jab with the right hand over the top.
Michaela found out quickly in the early goings of this match that jabbing her way into striking distance of Alicia would prove difficult because Alicia's got the faster hands of the two, and she's looking to counter that jab from Michaela with a right hand over the top.
Speed, timing, power of that right hand counter, that looping right hand over the top.
Was disrupting Michaela Mayer's efforts to close the gap behind the jab. Early on, Alicia Baumgartner was more effective with her own jab and effectively disrupting Michaela's with the right hand counter. I had this thing scored 3-0 after 3.
With Michaela Mayer picking up the 4th round after picking up the pace. She landed a lot of good jabs in that round, good right hands as well.
It was more of the same in the 5th round. I gave rounds 4 and 5 to Michaela Mayer.
Alicia ate a couple of right hands between rounds 4 and 5, and she took the punch as well. They didn't seem to bother her, but they were still scoring blows.
Round 6, that seemed like a swing round to me, a round that you could have given to either fighter, but I decided to swing that round to Michaela Mayer.
I had a tie score after 6. 3 rounds to 3.
4 rounds to 3 after 7. Alicia Baumgartner took the initiative and took it to Michaela Mayer in the 7th round, doubling up on the jab, stepping into it, and unloading salvos of punches.
It was a very tense battle between 2 quality operators and 2 cerebral fighters that don't really make very many mistakes.
Alicia definitely took the bull by the horns in the 7th round.
After 7 rounds, I had this thing 4 rounds to 3 in favor of Alicia Baumgartner, 5 rounds to 3 after the 8th.
You still saw Michaela Mayer coming forward and trying to get aggressive in the 8th round, but Alicia Baumgartner was still in control.
Cleaner, clearer shots, and the better work was still coming from Alicia Baumgartner in the 8th round, in spite of Michaela trying to be the aggressor and trying to take the initiative.
Had Alicia up 5 rounds to 3 after 8, 5 rounds to 4 after 9, as I gave Michaela Mayer the 9th round. She was busier throughout, busier in that round. Looked like Alicia took that round off. Didn't see a lot of output from her, saw a lot of movement.
I gave the 9th round to Michaela Mayer, but I still had Alicia Baumgartner up by a point after 9. In the 10th,
I gave the 10th and final round to Alicia Baumgartner, who seemed the busier fighter to me, and more importantly, the more effective fighter, landing the cleaner, clearer shots, some good overhand rights.
I had this thing 6 rounds to 4 after 10 rounds in favor of Alicia Baumgartner.
Tight fight, tight performances from both combatants who really aren't the kind of fighters that make mistakes that either fighter can capitalize on. No glaring disparities in terms of their ceilings or their skill sets, but Alicia Baumgartner, she was just better, sharper, faster than Mayer. And I think the speed and the timing, that's what really troubled Michaela Mayer. She normally has a lot of success with her jab, but between Alicia Baumgartner's moving
lateral, creating space, eyes on the ball, eyes on the target, looking to counter,
that really disrupted one of Michaela Mayer's best weapons, and that really is her jab, her lead hand. She just wasn't having the same success with it against Alicia that she has against some other fighters. And a part of that, well, it's a physicality. It's that Alicia is more athletic than many, if not all, the girls Michaela has fought so far. She's more athletic.
Combination of things, really. It's a combination of good fundamentals and physicality. That
the marriage of skill and sharpness and speed. That's what got Michaela Mayer beat yesterday, and what was a very competitive, entertaining, albeit tense.
Yeah, because this wasn't an all-out war. This was more of a nail-biter.
Alicia Baumgartner post-fight blew off any idea that there would be a second fight with Michaela, blew off the idea that there should be a rematch, and in truth, I don't blame her, because if the shoe were on the other foot and Michaela Mayer emerged the victor, do you think she'd be in any hurry to give Alicia a rematch? Did she give Maiva Hamadouche a rematch?
Alicia made it crystal clear it's her intention to get Hyun Mi Choi in the ring and fight for the undisputed super featherweight championship of the world.
That's likely the exact same thing Michaela Mayer would have said had she emerged the victor yesterday, but she didn't, so...
It just is what it is.
Where Michaela Mayer goes from here, your guess is as good as mine. She can move up to lightweight and see if she can't get a Katie Taylor fight. If she can't get Katie Taylor, why not go up to 140 pounds to face the winner of Cameron versus McCaskill?
Yeah, I mean, if both Terry Harper and Natasha Jonas, who used to campaign at super featherweight,
if they can go all the way up there to 154 pounds, going to 140 for Michaela, that shouldn't be a problem. She's got a bigger frame than they do. She could fit right in up there at 140 pounds. As far as Alicia, the world is Alicia's oyster, because her options now are not exclusive to a Hyun Mi Choi fight. There is also Amandia Serrano, who campaigns one division south of where Alicia is right now. There are any number of potential super fights for the newly crowned unified
super featherweight champion. I went with Alicia Baumgartner on faith.
And she proved me right. I knew she'd be sharper, smarter, faster, stronger in this fight than we've seen her in previous fights, because in this fight, unlike the others, she actually had a full camp, full time to prepare.
Congratulations to Alicia Baumgartner for living up to my expectations, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. Believe you me, there's more coming from this fighter.
We then come to the main event of that same card. The long-awaited, long-anticipated showdown between Clarissa Shields and Savannah Marshall. A very difficult fight to score for me. Hard to create separation between the fighters, because while Savannah Marshall was effectively backing Clarissa Shields up, Clarissa wasn't being bullied per se, wasn't being ragdolled.
There were a lot of people out there that were convinced that this fight was going to end in a knockout, and while I viewed that as a distinct possibility, I didn't go with that myself. I figured this fight's going to go to a decision. It's going to go to the cards.
When it does, I figured Savannah Marshall may have done enough to eke out a decision behind activity, behind volume. I expected that Clarissa would give Savannah's power more respect.
I thought she'd be economic, try to box on the outside, work off the counter, and that might create a scenario where she might get outworked. That's not what happened.
Clarissa grabbed the bull by the horns and stepped into the kill box.
We saw both fighters slipping, rolling, and riding punches, bobbing and weaving, countering.
The majority of the fight was fought mid-range to inside, well within striking distance, and we saw good defensive highlights from both fighters, if I do say so myself. That's why the fight, at least for me, was a bit difficult to score, because while Savannah was backing Clarissa Shields off,
backing her into the corners, backing her into the ropes, Shields wasn't necessarily being bullied. She showed good defensive highlights to offset Savannah's work and countered in kind.
Though at the same time, we saw some good defensive highlights from Savannah as well. Slipping, rolling, riding punches, bobbing and weaving, angling off.
I think to the judges what was most eye-catching were the flurries from Clarissa Shields. Now, not every punch got through, not every punch, but at the tail end of those combinations, she connected quite a bit.
When it came to Savannah Marshall's offensive effort, she was definitely throwing punches in bunches as well. What looked to be the heavier shots that weren't always penetrating the guard, weren't always getting through.
I think we saw a fantastic gas tank from both fighters, because from round 1 to round 10, they were throwing punches in bunches.
I questioned ahead of this fight whether or not Clarissa would be able to take Savannah's power for the full course, for the full 10 rounds, or would she start to wilt? We saw good durability from Clarissa Shields, good durability from Savannah Marshall. For me, it was hard to create separation. No issue with Clarissa winning the fight, but like I said, for me, this was a harder fight to score than the previous bout, than Mayer versus Baumgartner.
There were moments in this thing, it was very hard for me to decide who to give a round to, because Clarissa did effectively fight her way off the ropes
time and time again, but time and time again, she kept finding herself there. And you don't end up on the ropes by yourself. Somebody puts you there. Ending up on the ropes is not the year mark of winning a round or winning a fight per se, not conventionally. To Claressa Shields' credit, what she did do effectively was take something off of Savannah's punches, not just by slipping, rolling, riding, bobbing, and weaving.
No, not just. She stayed with her, played her close to the chest.
It's not just the defensive highlights you have to look at, it's the offensive highlights as well. Shields being that close to Savannah, it took something off of Savannah's punches. You don't want to give her enough room to add torque, add mustard to that hot dog.
Being that close to Savannah Marshall, she can't get the same leverage for those long arms that she could if she had a little bit more space. I think Savannah should have created a little bit more space.
Because of those long arms, she needs a little bit more room, more real estate to add something to the punches, and Claressa being so close to her, it's hard to do that while Claressa's flurrying.
You know, after a while, I just had to give up scoring and enjoy the show because there were moments where it's just too hard to separate them.
Too difficult. Savannah Marshall was definitely applying a lot of pressure, and she was having some success with that, but she certainly wasn't having it all her way.
Claressa Shields had many eye-catching moments, eye-catching shots, and eye-catching flurries.
Even if it was hard to separate them at times, one thing that did stand out was Claressa Shields' hand speed. She was noticeably faster than Savannah Marshall. This isn't the aesthetic that I envisioned for the fight. I envisioned Savannah using her height more and her length, attempting to keep Claressa Shields at the end of her jab out of either the southpaw or orthodox stance. This was more of a brawl than I expected, more of a shootout.
A thoroughly entertaining shootout, but a shootout nonetheless.
Claressa Shields has effectively become a 3-time undisputed champion in her career. Congratulations to her. Where she goes from here, your guess is as good as mine. Perhaps a rematch with Franchon Cruz for undisputed at super middleweight?
Maybe a trip south back to junior middleweight where Natasha Jonas currently reigns as a unified champion.
Ladies have delivered yet another fight of the year candidate. A thoroughly entertaining fight from start to finish.
I wouldn't mind seeing a rematch just because of how entertaining it was.
That, and there really aren't that many girls with the ceiling of a Savannah Marshall at or around these weights, let alone the ceiling of a Claressa Shields.
Congratulations to her, and we'll see where she goes from here.
We then come to the co-main event of the PBC show that also happened yesterday. Caleb Plant's 9th round knockout of his domestic rival, stablemate, Anthony Dirrell. And listen, guys, a highlight reel knockout, it does have its virtues. The excitement it creates and what that does for a fighter's buzz, his notoriety amongst the paying public, the paying fans.
A highlight reel knockout has its virtues, it does, but context is key. This is Anthony Dirrell we're talking about.
I don't know anybody that actually picked Anthony Dirrell to win that fight. I didn't pick Anthony Dirrell to win that fight. I went with Caleb Plant. Now, I thought that Caleb might decision Anthony Dirrell. He went a step further, and he stopped him, and that's good for Caleb. Now he's back in the winner's bracket. He has effectively rebounded off the knockout loss to Canelo Alvarez last year. That's great.
But how beneficial this will actually be to Caleb depends on the PBC's ability to get him back out there in a timely fashion. Look at what's going on with Jermel Charlo.
He had a highlight reel knockout earlier this year over Brian Castano, and he has effectively sat out the rest of this year. He's not set to return until sometime next year. It's hard to build a fighter's momentum on a schedule like that.
And I don't know what it is. Is the well drying up? Is there a scarcity of fight dates? Is there a scarcity of money to where so many of these fighters are only fighting once, just once, in a calendar year?
Caleb Plant wanted to send Anthony Dirrell a message, and he effectively did that. Highlight reel knockout. Congratulations to him. I don't know what the referee was so fussed about. Caleb made a shoveling motion.
After he stopped Anthony Dirrell, Caleb starts making like he's shoveling dirt, burying the guy. That's essentially what he meant.
Said something about skin color doesn't win fights, referencing Anthony Dirrell's pre-fight comment that he'd never let a white boy beat him.
He would instead let a white boy knock him out, because that's what happened.
Yeah, that comment, I've heard one or two fighters in the past say something along those lines. We know that Bernard Hopkins quite famously said that. That didn't work out for Bernard.
No, it didn't. Sergey Kovalev beat him. Joe Smith Jr. retired him.
Anthony Dirrell took it upon himself to echo that sentiment ahead of this Caleb Plant fight, and the comment didn't age well because he got sat on his back pocket and he got sat down hard. So I guess that's why Caleb Plant took all of this so personally.
So Anthony Dirrell must feel pretty fucking stupid.
Yeah, he might. Naturally, what people want to see is a Caleb Plant versus David Benavidez fight, or Caleb Plant versus Jermall Charlo. Both of those fights work for me. It's important to build on this momentum, though. Don't have this guy sitting on the shelf for months and months and months before you wheel him back out there.
I think the same applies to Deontay Wilder, more so with Wilder because he only fought for one round.
The main event of yesterday's PBC show, PBC card, Deontay Wilder stopped Robert Helenius. And, I don't know anybody that was picking Robert Helenius to win that fight. I didn't pick him to win that fight. I said he was going to get stopped. Maybe he's up on the cards at the time of the stoppage. Maybe he isn't. But one way or another, I figured Deontay's going to stop this guy. And that's what he did as Robert Helenius, quite callously, was lunging forward, attempting to pressure Deontay, walking face first into a counter right hand.
Some people find the knockout a bit unconvincing.
Some people do. I saw the skepticism post-fight by way of social media. Some people feel like Robert took a dive, the same dive that Malik Scotch took. And look, I can only tell you what I think. And if you want to know what I think, and you're here, so I'll assume that you do, between the forward momentum of Robert Helenius, lunging in, leaning over his lead foot, then pulling back, being defenseless in the process, and Deontay Wilder firing that counter right hand and landing flush, it's not like Robert Helenius has world-class punch resistance. This is a guy who was stopped by Johan Duhaupas all those years ago. This is a guy who was stopped by Gerald Washington, who's not even known for being a big puncher.
Wilder stopping this guy doesn't have to be some kind of elaborate conspiracy theory. For Christ's sake, he used to be Wilder's sparring partner.
Wilder wasn't in unfamiliar territory with this guy. This was a rebound fight. A decent one. No more, no less.
Is Wilder really back, though, because he knocked out Robert Helenius?
There are certain questions we didn't get answers to yesterday. What's the physical state of Deontay Wilder as a fighter? And what's his durability like? Because he suffered 2 systematic beatings to Tyson Fury back-to-back. The kind of beatings that can take years off a fighter's career, and the kind of beatings to where the guy, he doesn't take a punch the same way moving forward. We didn't get those answers yesterday because Wilder didn't get hit.
That's not good or bad. It just is. We don't know if he's a shot fighter. We can't tell based on yesterday's fight.
Yesterday's fight only lasted 1 round. To Wilder's credit, better still, it only lasted 1 round. Robert didn't give us those answers, even though he was supposed to.
Robert Helvetica didn't land anything.
Hellenius.
Hephaestus.
Look, whatever he is, he's been stopped by lesser punchers than Deontay Wilder before, so Wilder stopping him while he's on the bounce isn't some monumental moment.
Sorry to burst your bubble, but it's not. It doesn't speak to what might happen to Deontay at the hands of a more capable fighter.
Don't accuse me of sour grapes, sweetheart. You can't do that. I said Wilder was going to stop this guy. Wilder stopping this guy was a foregone conclusion as far as I was concerned.
Put him in there with a Joe Joyce and see what happens.
Yeah, people think Deontay would knock out Alexander Usyk because Robert Helenius is a carbon copy of Alexander Usyk because he's as tricky and as elusive and agile and mobile.
Robert Helenius is none of those things.
Knocking out Robert doesn't speak to what might happen to Deontay opposite the ring, a more capable fighter who's not as worse for wear and takes a better punch.
No harm, no foul for Deontay, but it was a rebound fight. Let's not blow this out of proportion.